Right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and good night, folks. Welcome to Karate Belts. I am John.
I'm Jeremy.
Welcome, folks. Right. So, quick bit of news. Jeremy, did you hear about this? Um, Apparently, under first and foremost, please donate to the Sherry Joe Reconstruction Fund. That will be posted in the link below. But apparently, tied to the unfortunate tragedy of Sherry Joe, there was actually a interesting little bit of news that came out of that. The war tunnels that were under Sherry Joe, that were dug out by the Japanese military during World War II, are now accessible.
Hmm.
They weren't before because of the construction over top of them.
Mm-hmm.
But those tunnels are intact.
Hmm. That's a,
So
that's interesting. I remember going into some of those tunnels that that you could go into when I was there, and it was that was a complete um just I don't know, just a mind numb experience. Like wow, just it was so many wow moments. You're like whoa. It's not like being over here reading about World War II in a history book is like, okay, this is where it was really happening. I was like, wow, it was just kind of wild. So, in some ways, think about it as, yeah, it's definitely a tragedy that Sherry Joe Castle has been devastated the way that it has been, but in some ways, maybe this is another almost blessing where now you've got an extra piece to show tourists and people who want to learn about it. So
it's another part of history that at that time Sherry Joe was used as a fortification
mm-hmm.
base. And the sad part, because if we talked about this before, but if you go to Sherry Joe, it's built like a castle. You
Yep.
cannot get up it, and like it's not easily accessible. It's on a hill.
Yep.
So strategically speaking, yeah, I guess it's worth it. Yeah, it does really. There are a lot of other things that bear into consideration with Sherry Joe, like how it's going to get rebuilt again, and this might be another opportunity to have history kind of revealed to people in a different way. And I think it's interesting, and we'll link that kind of article down below. But it's an interesting little bit of like you said, a blessing in disguise, I suppose. So
Yeah.
But it's nice to see that the government's actually getting off its arse and saying we will rebuild Sherry Joe. It's just hopefully they'll actually move on it, but it will take a long time. So
Yeah.
well, on to happier news. So expectations. That's an odd transition, if anything. And I'm very bad at them on this podcast. So you and I were talking a little bit about expectations versus reality in terms of training and kind of what we feel is necessary and what we don't feel is necessary in training. And so today we are going to tackle this subject with all the tackling we can do. Do we tackle in karate?
Sometimes.
Sometimes, I suppose.
Well, else fails.
Tackle!
Hey,
So,
it works for rugby, so hey, it might as well work for karate too, right? So there we go.
yeah, there we go. Let's use rugby, not football, but oh well.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. All right. Yeah.
The Eagles lost another game, so I'm kind of out with football this year.
Mm, yeah. No, Chiefs are still in it, so that's a good thing. So
This has been football talk on Karate Without Belts. All right.
Oh yeah. All right.
You blame
Well,
me for that one. So, expectations. How come, what can we first say about expectations in terms of training?
well, the first thing I think about whenever I start thinking about expectations and stuff, you got your own personal expectations, whether
Right.
it's training or teaching, how that's going to affect your students, how that's going to affect you, how that's going to affect your training and stuff like that. Then the other part is always look at the expectations from the student's point of view. And if you've got a younger student, obviously you got to take into account the parents' expectations of what they're learning as well too.
Right. So I guess one thing we can talk about here is like what would be our expect what do you think should be a general expectation for people who teach or even general expectation for people who are uh, who consider themselves serious practitioners of karate? What do you feel a lot of people have in terms of their expectations, and what do you think their expectations should be?
Well, I, my expectations from students, whether current or past, has always been okay. One, know how to be aware. Two, be in the moment on everything that you're doing. Because I think one of the things that a lot of instructors get into a trap of is they get into what I call the checklist trap. Check, check,
Hmm.
check, 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 check. Okay, we're gonna do count of one, count of two, count of three, count of four, do. But it gets into quality versus quantity. And for me, and I've told a couple of stories on here. I'd rather have somebody do Nanachi Shodan for 2 hours than go through 20 different kata. I'd rather have one thing down to a T, or I wouldn't say a T, but at least really get in depth and really start analyzing things, really start looking at what are you doing? What are you thinking about? Are you actually present when you're doing this? More times no than you are. And it's like, and one of my big things is if you're not present while you're training, how you train is how you're going to be outside of the dojo.
Hmm. Well, I
And
think that yeah,
and that's just one of my expectations always been. How you train is how you're going to be out of the dojo. You know, so in some ways it is kind of like I'm not trying to go back to football talk, but I mean I was listening to some of the coaches over the years, and it's like, look, when we train as if we're on game day, and it's like, okay, which makes sense.
and there's nuance to that, but the I think that brings a very good point where you're talking about the presence of mind when we consider our serious students, um, because an expectation of the students and what we expect from them uh, doesn't always match a reality. And the unfortunate part is you don't have the students you want, you have the students you have, right? So it's you don't always get to have the best students, or you don't always have the ideal students, right? In an ideal world, you would want students who will be completely, humble and listen to everything that you say and ask the questions that you really want them to ask and have the conversations you really want and have them have the attitudes just the right way. But in reality, people are people.
But
And
you bring up that point, which is kind of interesting, and I think that's one of the things from my point of view, from me being an instructor over years, is I look at that and I'm like, okay, this student's not not communicating to me the way I want. We're not. There's some type of conflict, whether it's personality, whether it's training, whether it's expectations, whatever it is. So then I start looking at myself. How can I get this person or this student or to evolve into what I'm looking for so that I can move them forward?
Right.
So it becomes kind of, I hate to say it, it becomes kind of a dance, and it does.
I mean, that's the going back and forth of it, because you want, like, the reality, trying to match a student to your expectations. Sometimes you need to adjust them or understand that they're not going to get there in that time. Um, we both understand kind of the heartbreak that it goes through to you put the time and the effort into the student, and then either A, it doesn't work, or B, they just end up quitting. So both are very frustrating, but I think, especially with this, with our, we, at least the people we feel are more serious students, they don't always understand the expectation is that, karate is something that just they do. You wake up, you go to the bathroom, you put on your clothes, you do karate. And not everyone will have that mentality. Some people have that mentality is, I've got that karate lesson Tuesday and Thursday, and maybe I can go on Saturdays if I really want to. So
It's a great cross training with my Pilates and yoga and whatever else. It's just, I mean, I mean, if that's your expectation, that's fine. I mean, but if that's what you're looking for, maybe you need to look at more of a commercial space dojo. That's I guess, or as I like to kind of call them, Mac dojos. Sometimes, it's like they're just churning and burning people in and out, and it's not.
well, and those places don't care about students. They care about numbers. They care, like, we they don't care about. I I've rarely ever seen those people actually care about. I call those people who run those schools owners. They're not teachers. They're owners, and they don't really care about the student. But what I think our expectations as people who've been training for a long time is we want kind of mini us's. We want to kind of not necessarily replicate us, but at least replicate our attitude towards karate.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's not so much mini. I don't need a mini me. I'll tell you that much right now. Um, I, I look at, like, I try to instill, some of the life lessons I learned, try to build off the foundation that I learned, and let them kind of build their own, journey in life. Not so much, hey, this is my journey, therefore you should have this journey. Well, it's not.
No,
No, I mean, that's wrong, and that's not my place to do that. And it was one of those things where, going back to a long time ago, um, um, I'm not gonna say who it was, but this person was showing me this technique, and it was doing one thing and then crossing completely across the body. Well, this person was much smaller than I was, and yeah, that person might have made that work. Me, kind of a big guy, I'm not going to cross across. If I'm on the outside, I'm not going to cross across them. I'm going
right?
to make something happen. I
Yeah,
mean, and I wasn't trying to be mean, but it's like, that's not going to work for me, and I know that. And that's kind of what I want to instill in my students. I may show them something, and it's like, this may work for you. This may not work for you. Like, one of the things for me, like on technique, like whenever I get somebody, when we're doing like hand grappling or tuite.
right.
I got somebody that's rooting, as I like to call it, root down. and they're real hard to move. Kind of one of the things that works for me doesn't work for everybody else. Because, like I said, I'm pretty big guy. I mean, what I'll do is I'll bump into them. I'll get them just enough off balance to where, boom, then I can pop that technique on somebody.
Mm.
You know, is it something in the curriculum, or hey, we're going to teach bumps today? No, it's something I figured out along my me being a dummy, trying to figure out how to make stuff work. And that's kind of what I try to instill in people. A lot of my students, they're not going to be able to do that. But are they going to be able to do something else? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because not everything's going to work for everyone in the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
And they can pick something, and they can find something that's going to work for them. That's going to work for them. But you're trying to your expectation of the student in that case is not do as I say, but it's think more analytically.
Right.
And when you have a student expecting, hopefully students will catch on to that and start the motors will start going on that. But that doesn't always happen, and it doesn't always happen the way you want it to, right?
No.
And that's the reality is that though that's going to be an aspect of training that I would say I don't necessarily mean to say this cautiously because I've known you so long, but you expect that of people. You expect people to at least try to start thinking more analytically of stuff. That's not always going to happen in the way that you wanted to, but at least that's an expectation, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely. I mean, think for yourself. I mean, yeah, it's I'm running into this in my college course that I'm teaching right now. I got some people there in there just for the grade. And I've got people in there who have delayed their graduation just to take this course with me because I've done this before.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, and the two people that have delayed their graduation, they've basically come up and told me, it's like, look, we don't care what we don't want to fail because we want to graduate, but they're like, we're trying to get everything we can from you in this arena because you've been there and done it.
Mm. So then, I guess with the kind of going on that, how do we adjust our expectations for students who may or may not necessarily think the way we do, or that necessarily we don't communicate what they want so clearly? How do we get them to do the things that we require, that we want them to do? How do we get that? How do we get that out of them? How do we get that expectation out of them? Or do we need to adjust our expectations in that regard?
Well, one, I'll say this: I don't think we adjust expectations ever. I mean, that's me because you start adjusting your expectations, you adjust yourself,
Right.
and you adjust what you bring to the table.
I guess expectations in that matter isn't the right word. I guess standards would probably be a better word.
Well, same way. I mean, you expectations, standards, whatever, whatever you decide. I mean, you're the expert. I mean, when you're the instructor, you're the expert in how that student should go. Now, as an instructor, I will say this: there have been a handful of times where I've had students just, I mean, we just did not gel at all. I mean, it was
Right.
like it was like mud and water. I mean, or water and dirt, and we made mud, and it was like, no, this just did not work. And I have, at that point, I got to look at, am I so committed to the student I just want them to stay with me? Or am I committed to the student to where I want them to get this? So maybe I say, hey, look, I think you're going to be better off learning over here with this person, at least for this piece of it, or whatever you're trying to get out of it, because I'm not getting through to you. And I think this person might be able to get
Right.
through to you. And I think that's where, as an instructor, you got to put your ego away.
Right.
You've got to build relationships with other instructors. You know, do I have all the answers? No, I don't. I don't want to have all the answers. I really don't. But I do want to be able to trust people around me who teach and like how they teach, understand what their standards are, what their core philosophies are, what they're about. And maybe I can't get to somebody, maybe somebody else, with a little bit different outlook is going to be a much better fit for them. And that's fine.
Right.
And I can't take it personal.
Those are good points, and hopefully anybody who's lucky enough to be able to be that open-minded towards the community around them, and B, have a community around them that'll be open-minded enough towards them.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you're kind of stuck in a weird situation where you want to send someone to someone else, but you really can't. So,
well, there's only a handful of places that I would not send a student to, but that's a off topic.
that goes in a different direction entirely.
Yeah, that's a not eating sushi and drinking sake or aomori one too. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Let's reel this fish back into to one thing in terms of kind of expectations and training. We talked a little bit about students and what we expect of them, but I think there's something that's not really talked about a lot is teachers and their training, right? And
yeah.
and I guess because it's hard for us to separate teacher and just guy who does karate,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or a person who does karate. I guess what would be the standard, or what would be the expectation, or what would be like the ride or die in terms of what needs to happen for that person on a daily basis in terms of their own training, as to even to be considered a good teacher, right?
I think in that aspect, you kind of got a dual-edged sword. You got to definitely keep your skills up,
Right.
obviously. But on the same token, you've got to be able to keep your skills up communicating what you're teaching as well. And I think a lot of people get into that trap where, well, if I'm just good enough, it'll just come out and it'll just be there. It's like, well, maybe not.
Right. You could be great at karate, but terrible at showing it.
Well, you may even be good at showing it, but sometimes it's interesting because I'll just kind of tell you a little story. When my daughter was asking me, some things about, somehow we got on a topic about when I was a really young kid, I had hearing loss, and I wasn't able to hear very well at all, and it was hard for me to hear people tell me instructions, and I got to the point where I listened, but I'd also watch people's lips.
Oh, do you know how to read lips?
No, but not completely. But if I heard just enough, I could put it together. If I had two senses, like if I had my vision and my hearing going, I could put most of what somebody was telling me. Even at, how old was I, 5 or 6? I could. That way, I didn't get in trouble from mom and dad.
Right.
That was the whole point of it. But I wasn't great at it, but it was something that helped me out and helped me manage where I was at in life. And I think that's reeling this back in. I think that's part of it. Yeah, you can show somebody, the best technique in the world, but sometimes somebody may not see it. They may have to hear it. They may have to feel it. They may have to they may have to do some other sense to actually get what's going on with what you're trying to teach them, if that makes sense.
No, that's important, because if you it goes back to, if you can kind of figure out yourself, you should be able to figure out other people.
Yeah.
And so if you are able to figure out how something works, like a good example would be if you understand why a stance is a stance, like Seisan,
Mhm.
or Zenkutsu Dachi, however you want to,
Right.
whatever you want to call it, front stance.
Right.
What are the purposes of that? If you understand what the purposes of that are, or for the purposes of what you're showing it for are,
Mm-hmm.
then you should be able to help other people get to that point.
Right.
But then the other issue becomes, everyone in the room might be at a different point of understanding in terms of that.
Right. Absolutely.
So that's what separates like the real karate people from the Mac Dojo people, um, the Mac Te, if we could.
That's awesome.
A double with a double quarter kata.
Yeah.
But the difference between karate and makte is wide and various. But the difference would be is if you actually spent time on and you could actually tell how everyone else in the room was, and going through the steps of being able to take everybody from A to Z in terms of too many coins. And A to Z in terms of how, for example, the front stance needs to be and why it needs to be that way, and then how you're going to execute whatever you're trying to execute. I don't want to get like super specific, because other people got different ideas on how that's supposed to work. So
Right. I mean, I think, I'll go back to my experience with Robbie, my first instructor. I mean, he would explain it to me. He'd say, "This is boom, 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 boom. This is the structural part of what you need to know how to make this stance work." Okay, great. Then he would go about, and then he'd put me in the stance like, "This is how you balance in this stance." And I mean, he hit you from 8 different directions. You've seen me do that. I mean,
right,
if you're in a stance, okay, hit you from the front, hit you from the back, hit you from the side. Are you still balanced? If not, then it's not correct. So in that aspect, he was implementing, not just showing me, not just telling me, but also making me feel it.
right.
So in that aspect, I mean, I had 3 senses to go off of, not only to know it, but also to explain it. So I think that's key for a lot of people. Or I mean, I can be wrong, but and, I
Well,
mean, if I am, that's fine.
it's key. It's key to being able to see how things work, right? And
Absolutely.
if you're not, especially you got to think of it this way. What makes karate training, and what makes that different from other training? What makes that different from Wing Chun? What makes that different from Taekwondo? What makes that different from mm, Jiu-Jitsu? What makes that different from Aiki? What makes that different from Idol? Um, and we could name specifics, like stances, Makiwara training, kinds of sparring, different kinds of katas.
Uh,
But
Interpretation, I mean, it keeps going on and on and on. Interpretation of
yeah,
how,
and then that'll get into who's your teacher, who's your lineage,
yeah.
all that stuff. Um, which I don't know. That tends to be a short conversation,
Well,
but
it's either a very short conversation or it's the conversation that lasts decades and decades. So it's kind of,
yeah. But if you can be able to kind of interpret what you think is important to your students, or kind of translate that into your teaching, right? Because if you Like, what would be something a teacher needs to do every day to be able to keep up their skills?
I would say this is kind of what I've done in the past. One, start with whatever foundation I'm going to begin with. And it's like, okay, so I'm always going to do Nanachi Shodan. I'm always going to do exercise 1, 2, and 3. You know, I mean, then I'm always going to do probably like a Tamari Seizan. Then I'll probably do, you know, something with a bow, just as a standard, and probably Subarito training. That's I would say that would be my foundation. Boom, right there
On a daily basis.
on a daily basis. So that would be about, I mean, just going through that,
Right.
not really analyzing it, just going through. And I think on that aspect, those are things that I've gone through over and over and over. So on a daily basis, I would say, I know I've done this where I would just go through those, on a daily basis, maybe once a month, really look at them, like really heavy, intense. Then from that, pick something that I'm going to be working on, like maybe a different weapon, and then maybe, a different kata, like let's say Kusan Ku, pick that kata to really work on, and then work on maybe Aku or something like that. And then that would just kind of evolve into what I'm trying to teach, whether it's technique, whether it's the actual kata, whatever it is. But I mean, that way I can throw that into the mix of what I'm teaching. So.
And okay.
Uh,
do you think those things that you go through on a daily basis are also going to be the same things you do in class? Or are those the same, what you do on a daily basis, or should be the same thing that you do in a class?
I think you pick and choose. I think there are certain staples that you will always that I always did in class.
Right.
Like exercise 1, Nanachi Shodan, that was almost always in class. You could almost bet dollars to donuts that I was probably going to do Subarito training almost 3 weeks out of the month. I mean, those were almost a given, period. A lot of times I would do Tamari Seizan, that kata a lot. That's typical. That was always typical in most of my classes. Bow would be more along the lines of if weapons came out past the Subarito, yeah, that would come out. Exercise 2 would usually come out as well too. I mean,
Right.
that would be kind of my standard thing. So I mean, that may not be everybody else's standard, but I think that's
Right.
that's what I always, those staples, and then I do something else.
But we can use that specific as a kind of a standard that people who are training, people who see this as something that's a part of them rather than just seeing it as something they do Monday and Wednesday.
Right.
Because I think there is a mentality of people who take karate far too seriously to the point where it's a little ridiculous. And there's people who don't take it seriously at all and only see it as an exercise, in which both sides kind of are a little mind-numbing. But there's kind of those of us nicely in the middle who see karate as something we do as part of our lives, but we're self-aware to understanding that it's not the only thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good example of how you take what your personal training is and putting that into your actual classes. Not everybody teaches, and I think that's fine. I'm I think there's a growing number of people who are not teaching.
Yeah,
but
and I mean, right now, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, I don't teach much hardly at all anymore, and I'm okay with it. But I mean, certain people I work with that I really
yeah,
don't.
but I mean, there's other extenuating reasons. I believe that's happening as well. Not just everyone's got their own reason, but being able to we have that kind of ride and die aspect to our training. Yeah, I don't know necessarily saying ride and die is necessarily the right word for that or the right phrase for that, but we have our own personal things where we'd say this is what's important to our training, and everyone who learns ends up, I think, getting that. So I think
I don't think everybody does. I really
really
don't. I I think some people get it and other people don't. And for the system that we've been a part of and stuff, I mean, Nanchi Shodan is like kind of our staple. The Nahanchi katas are basically our staple of what we do. And a lot of people, they learn them, and over years, they just glance over them. Hey, it's just like the first 2 or 3 katas and just run through them. Okay, now we get on to what we want to do. It was like, wait a minute, if you're not taking care of your foundation of what your entire art is built off of, then basically not only you just playing karate, but you're kidding yourself in your training, and you're losing your expectations and whatever you're wanting to get out of it.
Right, and then you're expecting, and that's a negative aspect that goes into teaching as well, because how often have we had this? Oh, whoops, my computer's yelling at me. No, we're good. How often is it that we've heard people get away from that, and then everything looks like slop?
Well, yeah. One of the things that I noticed for years, and it goes back to intentionality and how you teach intentionality. I'll tell you what, I've tried to teach intentionality for the whole time I've been teaching, because I think that's one of the most important pieces of it. But I don't know, sometimes I feel like that's one of the most, I think that's the thing that rubs me the wrong way when people practice. Or, they'll say, yeah, I'm an assistant instructor this, and you watch them, and they have no intentionality of what they're doing at that point in time. I'll never forget this. It was we're at a headquarters dojo, and the person that run the headquarters dojo lines us all up, and he wants us to do what was it called? It was it's exercise 3 with us, but it's kind of like what we always call the zigzag drill.
Oh yeah.
And I learned
a couple different versions of that, but
right. And I learned it a little bit differently. But I'm watching everybody go, or the majority of the people going through this, and it was like a sick tree branch. And I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad, but now, were their movements right? Yeah, but they had no intentionality in what they were doing.
Nothing behind it.
Nothing behind it, and you could see it, you could feel it. It was like, how in the heck do you expect to translate what you're learning to something real? And I guess
right.
that's my expectation. And it wasn't, these were not beginner students. These were people who trained 10 plus years. And I'm like, come on. And so all of a sudden I get called up to do it. And I was like the last one in line. So, I'm kind of used to that. That's fine. I'll be last. I'll be the caboose. And I get up there and he's like, "Are you ready?" And I mean, I'm literally shaking, ready for him to just say go. And I mean, everybody's like, "Is this person gonna stroke out? What's going on?" I mean, and so all of a sudden, as soon as we go, I mean, I'm just like going at it, like I'm in a fight, and everybody's just like, "Holy catfish!" And it's not to say what I'm doing is right and what they're doing is wrong, but there was nothing behind what they were doing. And
No, that's what you need when you do training. I
yeah,
I think there's nuance to that because it's the term of fight the way you train the way you're going to train the way you fight.
mm-hmm,
Um, the nuance behind that would be is that it's okay to keep things like slow and steady for certain parts of training. Like if you were talking about just going through like your katas when you're just kind of warming up for the day.
yeah,
You're not gonna be able to hit that point, which was you were just talking about, when you're
well,
just waking up at 5 in the morning. By the time you finished warming up, however, you should, if you've been training long enough and you're in a class working out, and especially if you're the teacher, you're somebody who's been training a while, you've got to represent it. You've got
yeah,
to show it. And if you're not doing that, even if it's a basic drill,
yeah. And I mean, like I said, I mean, that gets back to, where's your presence at? I mean, that gets into what my expectations, what my standards are. I mean, to me, even if you don't do something perfect, and probably somebody's gonna, they'll tear it up.
your arm
Fine.
was out of this position, your elbow was
You,
out here,
you know what?
shoulders
You're
were off.
gonna learn. You're gonna learn a lot more from making mistakes than you are doing something perfect. I hate to say, trust me, I've learned a lot of lessons from being stupid. But
Well, it's also is that if you do everything, the assumption of doing everything perfect is that you don't realize necessarily why you're doing it perfectly. You can be,
right,
or it's like saying something in a language you don't understand perfectly, but not understanding what it means.
right, and I think today's society has gotten very bad about that. I think that's part of the thing that we struggle with is because a lot of a lot of educational resources, in our school systems, they get into, oh well, you have to have an A, you have to have an A, you have to have an A, you have to have an A. Well, now you've got. I mean, when I grew up, you had one valedictorian, one person that was the top of the class, one. Now that ain't so. I mean, you got. Well, we don't want people to feel bad about themselves. Well, then you can't have
A
40.
valedictorian, like then just cut it.
Yeah, it's like you
It's
you
fine to cut that stuff. It's
yeah,
fine.
I mean, exactly. But
I
don't
agree.
don't
I would agree with doing that. Don't try to have 7 people up there because then you're just going to make everybody feel worse.
or 40, or have 40 valedictorians. I'm like,
That's
what's
even
the
worse.
what's the point? And so anyway, I didn't mean to get off on that tangent, but it's
Well, and then that goes into we have an and then there goes into the expectation of rank,
yeah,
right? And then the training that comes in terms of that. Great movie. The Street Fighter, not Street Fighter, the Street Fighter.
yeah,
I'm not talking about like that like Street Fighter Mortal Kombat type deal. Street
yeah,
Fighter the movie, different movie, actually really great too. Maybe one day we'll talk about it. But that would be something that would be a great New Year's thing we should do. But um the Street Fighter, same actor who played the Swordmaker guy in Kill Bill. So he did a
oh,
lot. He did a lot of uh, like legit, it was a karate movie. It wasn't a kung fu movie that they were saying was a karate movie. It was like straight up like a karate movie. And the what he was doing was training. And I forget if it was in the first or the second one, but he was at some gym working out with some guy, and the guy was saying to him, "Ah, karate's a great sport. Once you've obtained fourth dan, all you need to do is make sure you stay in shape, and then no one will ever mess with you." And then a bunch of of the yakuza or triad guys like run in, and the fight starts or whatever. And the guy who said that at the kind of the end of the scene is just like cowering in the corner,
Yeah.
because his expectation, how he viewed his own training was, well, I've gotten to this point. I don't need to actually do any other training than not get fat, and that was it.
Right.
And then not realizing, like the other guy, the more serious guy. I want to say his name is Sonny Chiba, but I feel people will come at me and say I'm wrong. I think it is Sonny Chiba. Sonny Chiba ends up just like mopping the floor with all these guys. He's like, I don't care about that stuff, and like gets out of there. It's a weird 70s.
Yeah.
It's very weird by today's standards and kind of does some things that are not okay. But it's a great karate movie in itself. So
Yeah. No, it is interesting because I mean, I ran into this. I'll kind of make a parallel onto this. I ran into a little bit of this, and my daughter does she takes volleyball, and around here, volleyball is pretty competitive. I mean, they start kids out in first grade around here, and it's like, holy cow, yeah. So right now, I mean, she's building her skills and stuff, and so I got to get this out because this is my therapy part of this session. So because I, I I'm really trying to work on my personal communication. So I'm sitting there with another dad, finally the other dad just like, they need to be doing this, they need to be doing that, they need to be doing, and I mean, I'm just like,
the
okay,
coach.
well, I mean, the coaches that are coaching these little kids were the ones they're coaching the high school team, and I guess this year they went to the state tournament. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna listen to them. You need, I'm just trying to, okay, but it got to the point where it's like there was part of the stuff that I agreed with him a little bit, but on the most part, it's like, look, this is mainly a skills camp and a skills setting. They need to develop their fundamentals. They need to get a passion for the game, understand the strategy of the game before they really get into, hey, we're going to play this, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. No, but sometimes you just can't break through to people. And that gets into, I mean, that gets into everything that we're talking about. It's like, this person had a certain expectation that was to be delivered for his daughter or granddaughter. I don't know what it was, but he's a very unhappy person. But I was just like, okay, whatever. But I saw it more. Okay, they're building skills and stuff, but that was his expectation. My expectation was my daughter needs to build skills and enjoy the game and learn the strategy of it right now.
Yeah, at 7 years old, they're not going to be like, well, they need to be in a better. I don't know what any of the rules are. I just scream a lot during volleyball when I play it. I get really Philadelphia at volleyball, but yeah, they just need to enjoy it. They need to enjoy themselves. I teach first graders. Like, they
Yeah,
need to enjoy what they're doing. And you need to develop the kind of the listening and the discipline of kind of starting at that age. But at the end of the day, they need to enjoy what they're doing.
but I mean, this ties clear back to almost everything we're talking about. You've
Right.
got expectations of the person playing. You've got expectations of, sometimes the parents. You've got expectations of the coaches and stuff. And I thought the coaches handled it really, really well. They're like, we're developing skills. They're not going to go on a tournament team in second and third and fourth grade. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
They better start building skills. And that's the same way with karate. It's like, when you first start, you're building skills, you're building repetition, you're building intention, you're building all these different things. And for somebody to say, oh, this, and it's like, and if you're just going through the motions, that's all you're going to do, and that's all you're going to get out of it. So,
No, I'm always kind of two minds when you end up teaching kids. I think, especially when you get to young, and then there's not just intention and expectation, but also perception.
mm-hmm.
Right? Like when you get little guys in there, how do you attract people who are adults? How do you structure classes where it's just like, all right, little guy, bye. All right, main class with adults. And some people who can do one can't always do the other.
Right. Yep.
But at the end of the day, you have to understand your expectations. You need to hold on to your expectations, but understand the reality in which you're going to face them in.
Well, I think one other thing just to tie into is also understand what your limitations are and what your,
right.
Oh,
yeah. Because it gets into personal training expectations too, right?
Right. Personal training, and along with teaching expectations, what are your limitations? Right now, my training limitations are, my knee right now. It's like there's certain limitations I've got, period, in the discussion, until I get this either resolved or whatever's going to happen with it. But
right. My problem with that was just like over expectation.
Yeah.
Too much pressure. When you end up putting a lot of pressure on yourself, you end up freezing, and that is the most unproductive you can ever be. You can do a little every day and get a lot done.
Right.
But if you end up trying to do a lot every day, you'll get nothing done.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
and that flows over to classes too.
Yeah.
And what you were just saying in the beginning, listicling karate can be great, but it shouldn't be an every class type deal.
Right.
Cool.
Exactly. So.
I think that nails everything into the head into the head of his nail, but.
Well, for the most part, so I think we've covered a lot. So.
Cool. So, what you got going on this week in terms of training? How's the knee treating
you? It was okay until about 3 days ago, and then I was walking in a parking lot or something, it was like wasn't a pothole, but it was like a dip in the pavement, and totally straightened out my knee, and it hyperextended my knee back.
Oh God!
Even in my brace, so it's kind of like, it's pretty sore. So it's like I took a couple steps forward, now I'm taking 10 steps back. I'm like, okay, I gotta calm down. So again, it's probably I'm gonna start working on mainly some light footwork drills, and that's mainly it. So nothing heavy. It's just real light. Just try to get some movement in that knee. So
That sucks.
Yeah.
We can put a man on the moon, but we can't make straight roads.
Yeah.
Or flat roads.
Well, that's just Missouri. So anyway.
Yeah, Pennsylvania's full of potholes.
Well, yeah.
Depending on your tax bracket.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So,
as you had suggested to me a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking off air about linseed oil and crafting weapons, because around where I am, oddly enough, even though I'm very close to a very famous maker of karate products, they are oddly resistant to actually sending them to me. So the shut up and take my money aspect of that is apparently not working. So I'm trying to figure out a way of just constructing my own Kobudo. Issue is that there's like very little to no materials around here I can use for that. So oddly enough, so
Yeah.
got to figure out how to actually do that, and you know, there's a couple of Kobudo weapons that have a couple of weapons I have not worked on for some time since moving to Japan, and I think it's just, it's time to just try to even make a crude version of it so I can start working on it. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's cool. That's cool.
Cool. All right. Anything you got in terms of any call outs you want to make? Any things you want to plug?
No, not really. I'm good right now. So
Right on. Well, folks, please remember to donate to the Sherry Joe Castle Fund. Thanks as always for listening, and keep training.